Okay, picture this. Imagine a city built completely from scratch back in the 1930s that grows into one of India's biggest industrial hubs. We're talking a city with its own power plant, its own airfield, amazing schools, a place that pulled in the best talent from all over the country. Now, picture that exact same place today. It's a ghost town. The huge factories are just silent, crumbling ruins. This is not some work of fiction. This is the real story of Dalmianagar in Bihar and its incredible rise and spectacular fall. Well, it holds the key to a much, much bigger economic puzzle.
See, this story of Dalmianagar is, in a lot of ways, the story of Bihar itself. And at the very heart of it is this massive question. How on earth did a state with so much mineral wealth, so much potential, end up as one of the least industrialized regions in the country? It just doesn't seem to add up, right? Well, that's the paradox we're going to unpack today.
And just to show you the scale of this thing, look at these numbers. It's pretty staggering. Bihar's industrial sector makes up a tiny 3.2% of its economy. Meanwhile, the national average, it's over 20%. That huge gap, that tells a story of unbelievable lost potential. So you have to ask, what happened?
All right, so to figure that out, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the big picture, that industrial paradox in Bihar. Then we're going to zoom right in on the incredible story of Dalmianagar, from its dreamy beginnings to its golden age. After that, we'll investigate the cracks that brought the whole empire down. And finally, we'll zoom back out to look at a really controversial national policy that, well, it changed everything.
So let's kick things off with part one, the industrial paradox. You know, to really get why Dalmianagar was so special, so out of place, you first have to understand the kind of economic soil it was trying to grow in.
So historically, Bihar was facing what you could call a perfect storm of economic problems. During the colonial era, it was basically treated like a hinterland, a place you just extract raw materials and labor from, not a place you build things. Then, after independence, the state split in the year 2000 was a huge blow because most of the big industrial zones went over to the new state of Jharkhand. What was left behind was mostly just a scattering of small, tiny units. And it's against this backdrop that the rise of a mega-complex like Dalmianagar looks so extraordinary.
And that brings us right to part two, the Dalmianagar dream. This is really the story of one man, an industrialist named Ram Krishna Dalmia, who looked at all those challenges and saw an opportunity. He decided he was going to build an industrial empire right in the heart of Bihar.
I mean, just look at the speed of this. It's incredible. It all kicked off with a single sugar factory in 1933, but then in just about 20 years, it absolutely exploded into this huge, diverse industrial ecosystem. You had factories for cement, paper, chemicals, hydrogenated oil, you name it. This wasn't just a few factories, it was an interconnected empire, rising out of the ground with unbelievable ambition.
So with all this growth, you get to part three, a thriving industrial oasis. Because Ram Krishna Dalmia's vision was so much more bigger than just factory output. He wanted to build an entire self-sustaining community from the ground up. And the scale of what he built was just immense. Dalmianagar wasn't just a place you came to work. It was a place you came to live, and to live really well. It had everything: huge housing colonies, great schools and hospitals, its own power supply. And get this, it even had a private company aircraft and an airfield. This was a modern, booming city that was pulling in the country's top professionals. It was like an industrial utopia in the middle of a struggling state.
But as you probably guessed, utopias don't tend to last forever. And starting in the mid-1970s, that dream began to fall apart with a speed that was honestly chilling. Which brings us to the dramatic turning point in our story, part 4, cracks in the empire. It was this toxic mix of problems, both inside and out, that started to rip this whole place apart.
It really started from the outside. The law and order situation around Dalmianagar just fell apart as local mafias got more powerful. Serious crimes like hoti and kidnapping became frighteningly common. That safe, prosperous environment that had been such a magnet for talent, it started to disappear.
And that climate of fear and chaos from the outside, it started seeping right through the factory gates. The whole complex became riddled with internal conflict. You had constant, politically driven labor strikes and work stoppages that would paralyze operations, grinding productivity to a halt. It was just chaos, both inside and out.
And this really was the final nail in the coffin. You've got a security situation that's collapsing and constant fighting on the inside, so what happens? The top executives, the brilliant minds running the whole empire, they started to leave. This brain drain created a huge vacuum, and that led to terrible mismanagement.
Without its leaders, the complex just stumbled, and massive debts, like for electricity, started piling up. Its fate was sealed. The collapse was just as fast as the rise. Everything that defined its success, the top talent, that modern lifestyle, the private airplane, it all vanished. By the 1990s, the once booming industrial city was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost town.
Which brings us to part 5, the ghost town's legacy. So was Dalmianagar's failure just a local story? Just a sad tale of crime and bad management? Or was it a symptom of something much, much bigger?
To answer that, you have to look at this number. It's kind of mind-blowing. Back in 1950, the eastern region, including Bihar, was an absolute industrial powerhouse. It produced 92% of all of India's iron and steel. It had this massive, undeniable natural advantage because all the raw materials were right there. So what in the world could possibly erase an advantage that huge?
And this is it. This is the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. Part 6, a policy's crippling effect. Because while Dalmianagar was fighting all its internal battles, there was a national policy that was quietly destroying the very foundation it was built on.
It was called the Freight Equalization Policy, and it was in effect for decades, from 1952 all the way to 1993. Now, on the surface, the idea might have sounded good. Let's spread industrial growth evenly across the country. And how did they do it? By subsidizing the cost of moving minerals, so they cost the same no matter where you were. A ton of coal from a mine in Bihar would cost a factory in Mumbai the exact same as a factory right next door to the mine. The intention might have been noble, but for Bihar, the result was an absolute disaster.
So here's exactly how it played out. By making transportation artificially cheap, the policy just completely erased the natural cost advantage that states like Bihar had. I mean, think about it. Why would you build your factory next to a mine if you could build it right next to a huge port or a big city market for the exact same cost? The result was predictable. Capital and new industries just flowed away from the mineral-rich east and headed straight for the coastal states in the west and south.
As scholar Chirishri Gupta puts it, the policy had this terrible double whammy effect. It took away the East's natural advantage, while at the same time, it actively helped the already richer regions get even richer. It literally redrew India's industrial map, and states like Bihar paid a very heavy price.
So here's the bottom line. Dalmianagar didn't just collapse from the inside. Its very real internal problems, the crime, the labor issues, the mismanagement, all of that was amplified massively by a national policy that basically pulled the economic rug out from under the entire region. The story of this one ghost town, it's the story of an entire state's industrial potential, tragically lost.
Which leaves us with one final and really important question. That policy is long gone now, but its legacy runs deep. Understanding this complicated history, where local failures crashed into a damaging national policy, is the first step. But the real challenge is this. Can Bihar learn from its ghosts to build the Dalmianagars of the future?